Hello, hello, hello. How are you? Hello, hello. Hello, hello, testing, hello, testing, testing, one, two, three. Hello, hello, hello.
अनुपमा जी, हेलो।
हाँ जी, हेलो।
अनुपमा आहूजा मैम, आप बोल रहे हैं?
हाँ जी, मैं बोल रही हूँ जी।
ओके,
आई वाज
कैन
जस्ट
यू लिसन मी?
आई कैन हियर यू। हाँ जी, आई कैन।
गुड गुड, थैंक यू।
थैंक यू जी। गुड मॉर्निंग।
Today one video also is supposed to be played actually. I talked to Mr. Behra yesterday.
हाँ जी,
So are you aware of that?
यस आई एम अवेयर, आई हैव दैट। आई स्पोक टू अमरेंद्र जी कल शाम को। हमारे एक तो
Okay.
इंक्लूजन एंड इक्विटी का एक है विपिन जी।
हाँ, एक मिनट का वीडियो था, कर्टेन रेजर था एक्चुअली. इट वाज सपोज्ड टू बी प्लेड yesterday only, but yeah.
Yes, yeah. It wasn't played, but I think the team has been told that they have to play it. Should I check with Sabah Akhtar or Akshay Gupta, because I've been in touch with them? Are
I
they going
think
to?
that's better. That's better if you can just check
Yeah,
with them.
I will check and I will also mail it to them. I have it with me.
Okay.
I'll also mail it. Right? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Welcome.
Mr. Ashwini, can I just once test whether I can share my screen or not?
Yes, ma'am, you can check.
Shall I share? Is my screen visible?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Ashwani ji.
Hello, yes sir.
अनीता मैम को भी जोड़ना है, सेक्रेटरी मैम को ना?
नहीं, मैम कनेक्ट हो गई सर.
अच्छा, सेक्रेटरी मैम कनेक्ट हो गई हैं?
यस मैम, यस सर.
ओके ओके, थैंक यू.
विपिन जी,
बताएं प्रोफेसर अनुपम।
मुझे कहा था एक अक्षय गुप्ता जी भी हैं जो कोऑर्डिनेट करने, मैंने दोनों को फिल्म भेज दिया है, जस्ट वांटेड टू टेल यू, आई ऑलरेडी सेंट इट टू देम।
ओके जी, थैंक यू।
थैंक यू।
अच्छा
गुड मॉर्निंग स्मृति जी, नमस्कार। अनुपम आहूजा here.
चलो बंद करो
Hello. Smriti ji, good morning. Can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes, Anita, we can.
Okay. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session on inclusion and equity, a very important area in the national education policy, which has been underscored by the government and also by the NGOs. I would in the beginning like to request the NIC to play a small video of 1 minute just to understand the message in the whole NEP. Can I have the video, please?
कुछ दिन पहले
Can you hear me?
देश की नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का ऐलान किया गया। ये पॉलिसी
Yes, Anita, we
21वीं
can.
सदी के नौजवानों की उनकी
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this session on inclusion and equity, a very important area in the national education policy, which has been underscored by the government and also by the NGOs. I would in the beginning like, can we play the film, please? Can I have the
देश
video,
की
please?
नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का ऐलान किया गया। ये पॉलिसी 21वीं सदी के नौजवानों की देश की नई एजुकेशन पॉलिसी का उनकी आशाओं अपेक्षाओं और आकांक्षाओं को लेकर व्यापक प्रयास
The video is not visible. Can we play the film, please? I think the video, there's no sound in the video. Can we replay it or something about it? Okay. Good morning, everyone. In this session, as I said earlier, is on inclusion and equity. And here we are addressing a number of groups that have been marginalized for a number of years. Now, I will be making a presentation on the NEP recommendation, a summary of an overview of the policy, before all my colleagues, Professor Smriti Saru, Professor Anupam Ahuja, and Vimi Singh from R.K. Puram School can join in and give their own interpretation of the recommendations. Can you hear me, all of you? So first I will start giving an overview of what actually the NAP recommendations are for inclusion and equity.
Anita ji,
I'm trying to.
you start your PPT, na?
The presentation is not coming here. I don't know what is got wrong in it. Only your screen, your face is coming. I'm trying to get my presentation. Okay, now I get it. I think there is some problem with the PPT sharing. I don't know why is it not coming on the screen. But however, I will read down, in case it comes, I will talk about it, but I will read the PPT and without sharing it. So first of all, we have to understand that this session is on inclusion and equity, which means that all children have the right to be in the school and also to gain access to education with all other children. So first of all, we must understand that in this chapter, in the earlier policies, what was the thing that all these groups like gender, socially disadvantaged groups like scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, and also minorities, women, were focused upon separately into separate sections. But in this chapter on inclusion and equity, we are talking about all these groups as a under the title of socially economically disadvantaged groups, and which include a number of groups and number of people who have been left out of education for a long time. So the groups which we are talking about are based on certain principles that have been categorized in this chapter. The first is the gender identities, which talks about gender and also transgender. We have socio-cultural identities, which talk about scheduled castes, scheduled tribes, and we have also geographical identities, which talk about children who are from villages, small towns, aspirational districts. Then we have also socio-economic identities, which means the children who are poor, and also a group which is a very important group.
अनीता
children
मैम,
with
आपका
disabilities.
आपका पीपीटी आ नहीं रहा है, विजिबल नहीं हो रहा है. आप शेयर कीजिए उसको पहले, उसके बाद आप अगर बोलेंगे तो थोड़ा बेटर होगा.
मैं कोशिश कर रही हूँ, पर स्क्रीन पे आप ही लोग आ रहे हैं, वो आ नहीं रहा. आई डोंट नो वेयर इज द प्रॉब्लम.
पहले आया था, अभी थोड़ी देर पहले एनआईसी.
हाँ, आई एम ट्राइंग माय बेस्ट, बट देयर इज अ कनेक्टिविटी प्रॉब्लम, a huge connectivity problem. I don't know why is it
आप चला
happening.
सकते हैं अक्षय का पीपीटी? मैडम कैन यू शेयर?
I am trying to share the content, but connectivity बहुत प्रॉब्लम आ रहा है, कनेक्टिंग नहीं हो रहा.
आप यहाँ से इनको ईमेल कर दें एनआईसी को.
मैंने कर दिया है, ईमेल किया हुआ है एनआईसी में.
ईमेल किया हुआ है आपको?
मैंने ऑलरेडी किया हुआ है पीपीटी इन्फोग्राफिक्स में उनको.
आप 2 मिनट वेट करें नीता जी, मैं
जी,
लाइन.
आप कर दीजिए वहां से प्रेजेंट. हाँ,
Okay.
देखती हूँ, अभी मैं देखती हूँ अगर आ जाता है तो. हाँ, अब आ गया. Now it is visible, isn't it?
Yes, now it is clear. Please.
Yes, now the connectivity was fine. Now it is okay. So I am here talking. Is it okay now? Can you all see? So we were talking about the special educational groups, or specially focused groups, or socially economically disadvantaged groups have been divided into gender identities, socio-cultural identities, geographical identities, socio-economic conditions, and disabilities, as I said earlier. Before I go into the recommendation, I would also like to here state why are these groups important, especially when we focus on a few groups which have really been left out of general education and getting quality education access. Then enrollment, if you can see that the enrollment of these children has been poor, the maximum number of children with disabilities who have been identified by the DICE is being children with intellectual disability, followed by children with locomotor, and then visual impairment, and so on and so forth. But these are the children who are identified. Many children out of these have not been identified in the population. So whatever the population here is, there are many more children than what we can see in this graph. And as you go by the enrollment, you will find that if we have 98.91 children studying in the class, only 1.09% of these children would be children with disabilities. Now, when we see about Muslim, here you can say even the Muslim enrollment has been very poor, and also SC, ST, compared to the other children, the enrollment of these children in the education system has been very low. Dropout levels have been very high, especially for ST and also children with disabilities, Divyangs, and they increase, the dropout increases as the classes increase. As they go from primary to elementary to secondary, the dropout rate increases, and among all these groups, girls are the ones who have maximum disadvantage, and we drop out maximum. So we can see, as you see this table, that the dropout rate has increased over the years, and also it shows that it has increased after primary and elementary level. And if you see even here, it shows the same this thing. Now we come to There are also building free standard boarding facilities, which is recommended, strengthening the Kasturba Gandhi Vidyalayas, and building additional Jawahar Navodayas and KVs especially in aspirational districts. Now, the Gender Inclusion Fund includes provision for bicycles, sanitation and toilets, resolve local specific access barriers, and conditional cash transfer depending on the need for the fund. So we must understand all efforts have been made to meet the special needs of gender, and as per the needs, provisions have been provided. And we have an inclusion fund, which means policy is in complete consonance with the Rpgwd Act. There's the Rights of Persons with Disability Act 2016, and it promotes inclusion of children with disability, Divyangs, in regular school. And inclusion fund is a very important provision for getting all the provisions and facilities and resource required for children with disabilities. Now they are talking about school complexes where, especially in aspirational districts, and, they have also called these complexes as special education complexes in many places. So what is the idea behind is that in certain places, there may be a need for giving more interventions, more efforts may be required, and there would be resource centers, they would be multi-category special educators, there would be reasonable accommodations, assistive devices, and language appropriate textbooks, tailored support mechanism to ensure full participation. So what the idea behind this complexes is that, in certain places where there is more people or children with disadvantages, or social, economical, disability, all these disadvantages, there more focus through inclusion fund and other provisions would be provided, and more efforts would be made to provide resources to provide quality education to all these children. Then they are talking also about the Indian Sign Language. They talk about in the policy regarding the standardization. We must all realize that we do have an Indian Sign Language which is based on the Asian system, but we have a number of dialects in signs in our country which need to be standardized, and this is the effort which the policy is promoting. And also based on this, the Indian Sign Language Institute, which has come up, would also create awareness amongst teachers and also, teach this or make this intervention through NIOS. Then there is a group with children with benchmark disabilities, and the policy recommends regular schools as far as possible. Regular school should be a place for these children to study with other children. They have the same basic rights as the other children, and also another provision in case they are not able to go to the school for temporary period, they can be provided home-based education. But here also they are talking about home-based education, not only permanently home-based, as a bridging intervention where these children are prepared to join a regular school. So whoever can join regular schools after home-based intervention would be given this enabling environment for them to join. As far as resource centers are concerned, it talks about educational needs, rehabilitation needs, assisting parents and guardians, and also providing resources through special educators. See, the regular teachers are still having a lot of, grievances regarding how they are not trained. They cannot look after children with disabilities in the classroom. They have, need more support. So from that perspective, all this support has been provided through the resource center in the complexes. Now, for measures for the socially economically disadvantaged groups, some of the measures which I will be talking about is organizing cycling and walking groups, one-to-one teachers, tutors, peer tutoring, appropriate barrier-free infrastructure, technological interventions, open schooling, bicycles and other modes of transport. And as I said earlier, cash transfer and scholarships, all those provisions are there. I'm only presenting a few. But wherever, according to the needs, a number of provisions have been provided for these groups. Now, children under home-based education must be treated equal to any other child in the system. So it is not that they are marginalized, they are segregated, and they are considered to be inferior. So home-based education is just a medium to preparing these children to join the regular schools along with their siblings, along with their peers, along with their counterparts. We are also talking about a National Assessment Center, Parak, which will formulate guidelines recommending assessment tools for foundational stage to higher education, including for entrance exam. And for students with specific learning disability, policy focuses on students with learning disabilities because they did not figure in the earlier act. So here more efforts needs to be made because they are not identified that easily. So that's why a lot of focus has been given on children with specific learning disabilities. So teacher education also is a very important part of this, and awareness how to teach children with specific disabilities and sensitization towards the other groups has been talked about. All the B.Ed and other programs would be accordingly changed. So I will, and when we talk about the new interventions which will come up after this policy. So learning outcomes, the national curriculum, the capacity building of teachers, alternate form of schoolings, all this will be inclusive according to the policy. And even in their other chapters on foundational and literacy, in the early education, in curriculum and pedagogy, in teacher education, concerns for socially, economically disadvantaged groups have been underscored. So, the Rpgwd recommendation, I do not have the time to go into detail, but Rpgwd Act, which came into existence in 2016, has been, a kind of foundation for talking about the provision for children with disabilities. And measures for SC/STs have include special hostels in dedicated regions, financial assistance, fee waivers, equity-based school culture, single window coordination for provisions. So this is very important because people don't have to then go from one place to another. Bridge courses to bring them at par in the school at the school level. NCCV. These are some of the recommendations this section talks about to promote inclusion and to promote equity. Teacher education, as I said, would be concerned with all these groups, and we'll talk about disabilities, gender, all this. And even if you don't, if teachers want to do some special certifications, some diplomas, that has also been encouraged. And even building capacity of alternative school teachers has been talked about. So one of the new innovation which has been introduced here is the students with giftedness or students with talents. Now this I would not call a group which is socially and economically disadvantaged, but of course there are many misfits because talented and gifted children are not recognized still in our school system. Many times they have problems because they get bored in the classrooms, the curriculum is too not according to their this thing. So some of the provisions for gifted students, which is a major radical reform in this policy, is encouraging gifted and talented students to go beyond the school curriculum. They talk about acceleration, they talk about interventions, they talk about clubs, and they also talk about, and especially in the rural areas, what is happening is that many of these children go unidentified and their talents are not developed. So all these provisions, which you can see on the screen, have been provided. We already had the National Talent Search Exams, Olympiads, but then there are many other children who do not come and compete in these exams. So the teachers need to be sensitized to identify talent right from the beginning. So this is they are nurtured and they are get what they deserve to become leaders and better givers to our society. So finally, I think I have just crossed 2 minutes more because my colleagues would be waiting. We are here talking about human rights. Here we are talking about empathy. We are talking about tolerance. we are talking about equality, and we are talking about global citizenship. That is the philosophy of our NEP 2020. And this chapter on inclusion and equity talks about an enabling environment so that all the values and all the recommendations and the respect for all children is maintained. Thank you. Now, since we have already crossed 25 minutes, I would now like to invite Professor Smriti Saru, who is a former director of Department of Special Education, Center for Special Education in SNDT Women's University in Mumbai. She is a very eminent educationist and a psychologist and has an experience of nearly 40 years in this field. She has also now working as a consultant with the Mauritius government, and she has been the chairperson for the National Curriculum Framework 2005. And I would invite Professor Smriti Saru to make her presentation in 12 to 15 minutes. Smriti ji, we cannot hear you. Can you talk a little loudly?
Yes. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Anita ji, for this introduction and inviting me for my presentation. I'll share my presentation.
I'm sorry, there is a little connectivity, but now it's better. That's better.
Can you see this?
Not yet. Yeah, now we can see it.
Is it okay?
Yes.
As Anita ji has already introduced, that this is a session on inclusion and equity in national education policy. What I have understood from the policy is that the NEP is based on the premise that children who learn together learn to live together. So they have to be included in the main system so that they learn how to, because one of the objectives of the that has been mentioned in the NEP, that all citizens should live together, all citizens have right to be contributing to the society. For me, equitable and inclusive education means all for learners, for all learners. If the mission is education for all, the goal should be to include all. It's very briefly I would like to mention here. Now, NEP emphasizes that every citizen has a right to being, thrive and contribute to society. Now, under this, if you look at this, the policy, you will find that it is based on human rights approach, which aims at creating an inclusive culture in the society and achieving an inclusive society. That is the broader aim. Now, when we come to education, what we have seen is this in this chapter, NEP has identified certain gaps. So these are the gap verticals which are mentioned in this policy. There are three gap areas: access, participation, and learning outcomes. In access, physical access, it also mentions about the geographical limitations. Children living in tribal communities, children living in tribal areas, children living in hilly areas have problems in access. There are problems with infrastructural access also, where the institutions do not have accessibility to the libraries, to other labs, because they don't have ramps, they don't have handrails, which the learners with the disadvantaged group find it difficult to be a part of the school system. Learning access, there is a big gap in the learning access. The existing system is not responsive to the needs of all learners. Now, in this policy, it has been highlighted that learning access will be provided by making the curriculum and the teaching methodologies more flexible, and there is emphasis on experiential learning. And because these gaps also develop opportunity gaps. Learning gaps result in opportunity opportunity gaps, the resources gaps, so digital gaps. So these are the issues which have been identified as far as access is concerned. Regarding participation, it has been observed that all SEDG, socio-economically disadvantaged groups of children, have problems in participating in the schooling process, and especially the girl students have been highlighted in the policy. So there are suggestions which Anita ji has already mentioned, that what are the suggestions given by the NEP. As far as learning outcomes are concerned, so far the outcomes were based on the achievement, the content-based outcomes. Now there is a big change where they talk about because there is a discrepancy between the expected outcome and the learning acceptable outcomes. So these are the gaps which have been identified in the NEP. Now how do we bridge the gap? Bridging the gap would mean that as far as access is concerned, we have to remove infrastructural barriers, attitudinal barriers, learning barriers. Now this is very important, that attitudinal barriers have been identified as one of the major causes of difficulties. Now we have also to build, how do we bridge the gap? We have to build school communities. We have to develop school clusters for better support. These have been recommended in the policy. For participation, it is recommended that learning has to be made more meaningful, relevant, and age and level appropriate according to the regions, according to the local needs of the learners across the board. When I say across the board, that means right from foundational stage to higher education. Now this can be done, participation can be enhanced by improving the student engagement, by adopting universal learning design of learning. Now learning outcomes should be based on individual needs and learning preferences, using differentiated instruction and assessment, competency based and continuous assessment. Often I am asked, inclusion, does it mean only enrollment, retention and achievement? For this purpose, I have tried to identify the six elements of inclusive education. And these are equity, that means even-handedness. Sorry, and equal, I am not able to, sorry. Equal opportunity, equal freedom, that means equal freedom, equal participation to all learners. Equal dignity, this is very important because our country is so diverse and children coming from different socioeconomic background also need to be treated as treated with equal dignity. Effective communication. Now, policy talks about technology tools, the resources. Now, if we improve the technology tools and if they use them in the schools, the communication will become more effective and it will enable reflection in the students and the teachers and all other stakeholders. Embrace culture. Now, NEP discusses about collaboration across the schools, and so here what I try to explain, that embracing culture means that children coming from different religion, different races, different socioeconomic background, different languages, different geographical areas will have to collaborate so that we can embrace the culture. Now, all these 6 elements of inclusive education, if they are incorporated in the curriculum framework, I think inclusive education will be possible. Now, as far as the process of inclusion is concerned, these are the 5 R's of inclusion that I have identified: reach, right, responsibility, relationship, and respect. That every learner has to be reached, because every learner has a right to education, equally has a responsibility to be a very significant member of the society, and all this can happen only if the relationships are strengthened and, of course, the due respect that every participant deserves. So look at in the slide that I have tried to say that amalgamation of 6 P's and 5 R's. will result in inclusion. Now, this will have to be taken into consideration when we are preparing the NCF and the pedagogical. The teachers, Anita ji also highlighted teacher competency building, and so I feel that teachers need to bask in the richness of the inclusive system. Bask means be for belief, that they have to believe in inclusion. They should have positive attitude towards inclusion. They should have the requisite skills and, of course, the knowledge about inclusion. What does it mean and how are they going to address the needs of all learners? How do they address the needs of diverse needs of learners? These are very simple classification that I have tried to make, that there are physical needs, there are academic needs, there are psychosocial needs. Now, diversity in terms of all these areas of needs will have to be addressed through the curriculum and through the teaching learning process. These are pedagogical concerns. Now, how do we differentiate? And one thing I want to emphasize here is that in this policy, NEP 2020, they have embedded, inclusion is not an add-on. It is embedded in the entire process, in the entire policy across the board. So differentiation in curriculum planning and instruction will have to be considered right from the when the curriculum planning is done. Curriculum adaptation, the teachers have to be trained in adaptation of the curriculum. They have to learn how to provide experiential learning to the learners according to their levels and their age and according to their capacities. The child-centered teaching learning strategies have been emphasized in the policy. They have to be made very, very flexible because all learners have different preferences, different needs and different orientations and different backgrounds. So earlier we used to have the assessment which was content-based. Now we talk competency-based learning outcomes and assessment. Now all these will have to be identified, and I think NCERT has already identified learning outcomes. Now this will have to be put to action. Now, continuous assessment has also been talked about in the policy. Assessment as learning, assessment for learning, and assessment of learning. Now, this is very, very important, particularly in case of SADGs, because their needs are very different from the rest of the students. Therefore, assessment for learning and assessment as learning is extremely important. Now, I don't know how to reduce it. Barrier-free access to across the. I think my screen has gone beyond this. I have to reduce it. I don't know how to do this. Barrier-free access to of education for all children across the ages. This is very important. Address diverse needs in all areas of curriculum, including arts, sports, and vocational education. Provide quality education to all learners through assisted devices, technology, tools, appropriate teaching learning materials. Eliminate social exclusion, that is of attitudes and responses to diversity in race, social class, ethnicity, language, gender, and ability. There is some problem. I don't know what is happening. Teacher competencies and skills have to be developed, and evidence-based practices have to be developed where we measure what we value rather than valuing what we can measure. This is very important because a lot of research is required to develop evidence-based practices. Create a system of teaching and learning that is competency-based instead of content-based. Create an educational collaboration that encourages and supports problem solving. Establish school clusters, I have already mentioned. And provide inclusive curriculum that is value-oriented and I'm sorry, extremely sorry. Create learning environment that embraces diverse environment and create inclusive school culture with support of trained inclusive teachers, social workers, and counselors. To achieve inclusion and equity, I suggest that we need to work together, we need to collaborate with each other, we need to tolerate others, because as Johnson & Johnson have rightly mentioned, none of us is as smart as all of us. The distance between your dreams and reality is called action. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor. You, as usual, you have bring out the academic aspects of the policy so well. Now, would I request Professor Anupam Ahuja to make a presentation or talk about a universal design for making effective classroom. Anupam, can you hear me? Anupam, your voice is not clear. Can you talk?
Am I audible to everybody? Am I audible?
You are, but not so well. I don't know.
Okay. Am I audible? And I have shared my PPT.
Can we have a better connection because the voice is breaking?
Okay, I'll try to get a better connection.
No, it's not your problem. It's that, and they have to increase the connectivity from their side.
Yeah.
So now it's better. Now it's better.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Professor Julka and Professor Smriti ji, for setting the stage. It's now 10:45. I shall talk till 11 o'clock, and I will share with you the essence of what my colleagues have said and the how of it. I mean, one of the things that the policy very vehemently talks about is that all children must get good teaching learning environments, and we ought to have effective classrooms for all. That is the essence of the policy in all its pages. And this has been said not just for a few children, not only for some children, but for all children. I'm going to now focus on some proactive measures that we have already taken to do this. Right in the beginning, let's again peep into our policy. The policy tells us that we have children in regular schools. Some of them are happy. If you see the cartoon of my presentation, some may not be so happy. We have children in special schools, and we also have large number of children. The policy says that there are 3.2 crore children in the age group of 6 to 17 who have still not seen the gates of our school. And that for us is our biggest worry. Children with disabilities need to get full participation in our regular schools. If we see again this cartoon, you will find that some children who are out of school are happy as well. So they don't really want to be in our schools. What this policy, when it focuses on inclusion and equity, talks about is that all our children should come to our regular schools in tune with our Rpgwd Act. And it says that no child should be happy outside the school. So that is our focus that the policy clearly reiterates for us educators, parents, and all other stakeholders who want to see all children happily learning in schools. The policy wants this to happen. And I think this diagram clearly indicates what we are saying. The policy says that when this happens, there's going to be diverse classrooms. Because we will have learners, as Smriti ji said and as Anita ji said, we will have diverse learners in our classrooms. Now, the policy tells us we need to address this diversity. How do we address it? That is the million-dollar question. Here is this child who says, I learned to draw pictures very well, but I learn when I see these pictures. Here is another child. This girl says, I need to have text read out aloud to me. And I learn when text is read aloud. Here is another child who says, I learn to conduct experiments, and I learn when I conduct experiments well. Well, clearly the policy has pointed out that children have varied backgrounds, they have varied strengths, they have varied needs, and they have varied interests. These three children that I have brought in this slide for us to see clearly indicate that their learning styles and their strengths are different. So what research tells us, in all these years in NCERT, we have worked relentlessly, NGOs have worked, and so many others have worked. If I was to summarize it very, very quickly, all research points out and says that the way children learn is unique, is as unique as their fingerprints. Now, if that's so, what do we do? Well, the way forward is, and that's what the policy says, that we need to design ways to teach them. We have worked for so many years already. NCERT has adopted an approach and found that very useful nationally, and that's the universal design for learning. And this is an approach that helps us to address this diversity that I've just talked about, and so have my colleagues. It helps us to, if we adopt this approach, we will minimize barriers and we will also maximize learning opportunities for each child. We also, let's take a quick look at this UDL. What does U stand for? Universal stand for design and learning. Well, if we look into, we borrow these architectural principles into our classrooms, what the policy now has made very apparent for us and makes us think about is designing the curriculum. So what UDL approach tells us is that the curriculum must provide equal opportunities to each child in the classroom. It must provide the flexibility, and that's the design bit, to meet the needs of all children. For example, if we were to think, okay, let's give a child a video. Let's provide the flexibility, and that's the design bit, to meet the needs of all children. For example, if we were to think, okay, let's give a child a video. Designed in a way that we understand how children learn. What does neuroscience tells us? The policy clearly indicates to us that we must follow the learner. So neuroscience tells us that the brain has three broad networks. We need to focus on the what of learning, the how of learning, and the why of learning. And our curriculum that we are now going to design after this new policy that's with us should help us do all these three learnings and bring them for children. Only then will we really be able to address diversity in the true sense. And for this to happen, we need to provide material in print, in braille, in digital text options. There should be text enlargement inbuilt into it so that a child doesn't feel, he has to take it outside and do it for himself only. There should be screen background contrast. There should be text to speech, videos with captions, as I just said, audios with transcripts, audio bits, and of course, sign language. We need to give children multiple options for expressing what they do. There is no point doing it in a structured way for all children in the same manner. So let children take assignments. Let children give their answers while painting. But they don't have to all write. Let's give them the option of preparing a video and telling us that they can show their learning. Let them draw comic strips. Let them optimize their access. Let's optimize the access for assistive technologies to come in. And let's remember that every child needs to get feedback. We need to give options and engage children. If fires one student, the policy tells us, in every page this message comes, will not fire another child. Give students the choice to fuel their interests. If they're interested, and if we give them we empower them, they will themselves come back and learn. Let them make mistakes. There's no harm, because they will learn from them. And if they love learning, they will persist through challenges. This is what the approach tells us. And this is what we need to remember. All of us listening to me must have seen or probably learned how to ride a bike. Now, when we ride a bike, we fall. we take children to the playground and we say, okay, here is grass. If you fall, you may not hurt. But a child falls, cleans his elbows, cleans his knees, and gets up onto the bicycle again and starts to learn to ride. He may fall 10 times, but he would like to learn. Now, this is what we need to remember, that he wants to learn. He doesn't mind falling. That's what we need to bring into our curriculum, how we can make children enjoy learning and persist even though there may be challenges. And that's what the UDL tells us. I have 7 more minutes to go. I will quickly take you through some proactive measures that NCRT has already done. Smriti mentioned about learning outcomes, etc. We have worked on this, what we have just shared with you and what the policy is saying. We have spent the last 5 years intensively working on this and how we can apply UDL into our classrooms, and we've seen success. Let me share quickly how we worked on some supplementary reading materials. We did and based on national workshops and a lot of research-based inputs, we have given additional features we have added, and this we have tried out extensively, and then we have produced a print and digital format. This is clearly UDL in action for you, friends. It's what I'm going to share is a reading series which is available on our website, and we have given both print and digital forms for children to read. For example, one of the things that I'll pick up some excerpts from what we have done and give it to you in the next 5 minutes. We have, for example, given braille and text on the same page. Now, when you do that, children sit and read it together. When they read it together, they don't look at a child who reads braille with tinted glasses, or a look that says, oh, you are different from me. And how we have done it, you can really get a feel of it if you go and see our website. It's all there. The text and braille are there on the same page. We have looked at the illustrations and we have given tactile forms to it, and we have embossed and computerized the texture, which again gives that same message which the NEP says, that all children should read one book, and that's what true inclusion all about. We have also looked at difficult words. Difficult words always come for children whether they read textbooks or when they read any other material. This is an example of how we can inbuild the meaning of a word on the same page in the form of a window. You just open the window, peep into the meaning, and then you close it. Now you can do this as many times as you want. So this doesn't make the child feel that I don't know the meaning. I have to read. I'm the only one who needs to look at it 5 times. You can look at it 50 times. But that's how this picture window really makes keywords. It helps them focus on them, and in a very without any discrimination, they can understand the meaning of the word. We have also got key visuals on the page. We have given them high resolution. This helps all children focus on the content and what is the key message. We have looked at simple things like giving a black border to a page, putting a red dot at the end of a sentence and a green dot in the beginning, putting a small arrow on the page to help children say that this is how you now go to the next page. Now, these are very subtle, research-based additional features which help all children access the book and also read with meaning and pleasure. We have done this in a digital form, just like I explained to you what the universal design approach says. In order to address diversity, you can change the background of the text. You can make it yellow and black, and you can make it white and black. Now, this is something that makes learning interesting for everybody. You can increase the size. We have in these books got a sign language video incorporated right in the beginning, which makes signing something that a child says, oh, this is simple. He is just understanding it from the sign language format. I can also view it, and I can also learn it with him, and he also has audio inputs. This introduction helps everybody to be together. There are, as I said, visuals in high resolution. You can go through this, but we have not just left it at just adding these. We have tried this out extensively in our fields, both the digital and the print version, and we have got very encouraging results on this research. We have taken this learning into our textbooks now. I will just in the next 3 minutes give you a glimpse of how we have made an attempt to make exemplar efforts to make our textbooks accessible. We have converted the chapters in the textbooks into sign language videos, which have illustrations, audio inputs, so that other children can view this sign language video with the child who has hearing impairments. And there are subtitles that come, and the teacher uses sign language along with body language, which helps all children make sense of what is being said. Now, we have also added audio tracks, two kinds of audio tracks with this, which has one with a very highly dramatic storytelling input and the other which has fluent reading. Now, all this has an introductory section which is meant to make children feel interested. Just like we said right in the beginning, unless the child wants to be in the class, wants to read, the best of things that we give them will not really help learning. So the introductory section is meant to arouse that interest. And as the child views this, he learns. And then we leave the child with some questions in his mind. Because unless we leave the questions, the child just will not take forward what has been given to him. Again, we have taken care that every child may not know all the words that are there in the textbook. So there's a glossary of difficult words, and there are difficult signs also appended with each story and poem. These are some of the exemplar books that we have taken from class 1 to 5 and worked on this. And this has been done in collaboration with the Republic of Korea. They are very keen to adopt what we are doing, and so are many other nations across the globe. Let's remember, friends, the emphasis of this is what the policy says, that we must work towards revolutionizing reading material. And this must be done on certain principles and approaches that have worked. And this clearly is an example of what has worked in our system. We have lived with this for the last 5 years. And this is an effort which at this juncture, when we are sitting down with the new policy and planning the curriculum, we can inbuilt it into the curriculum so that we have accessible material for all children, and we actually are applying the universal design, because applying the universal design for learning is actually equal to providing learning opportunities for all, which is what the policy says. It will help us celebrate the difference, which again is a key message of the policy, and it will enable schools to welcome all learners, not to look at them as additional work or as children who should not be there. So this, very briefly, friends, is the crux of how we can create environments in our classrooms which will be vibrant and will make happy learners come in and not want to leave our classrooms. That is the essence of what the policy says, and that's the essence of what we ought to do in order to take the next steps. Thank you for this time. It's 11 now. Over to Anita now.
Thank you, Anupam. It was a great presentation. And now can I invite Vimi Singh to make her presentation on effective classrooms, the challenges and opportunities in effective classrooms in case of classrooms. Vimi?
Thank you, ma'am. I hope my screen is visible to all.
Yes, it is visible.
Greetings to all the learned luminaries who are attending this session on equity and inclusion in education. I have been asked to talk about overcoming challenges in inclusive classrooms. Chapter 6 of the NEP begins by saying that education is the single greatest tool for achieving social justice and equality, an inclusive and equitable education is critical to achieving an inclusive and equitable society in which every citizen has the opportunity to dream, thrive, and contribute to the nation. The definition presented in the introduction represents a strong and widely accepted ideal ethical ethos attributed to inclusion and equity. NEP 2020 makes an unambiguous commitment to equity and inclusion and envisages a splendid inclusive future society. The policy proposes decisive and comprehensive action on several fronts. If, however, we look at the narratives about life in inclusive classrooms, pursuing the fuller, more genuine version of inclusion is no easy task. The challenges are enormous. The immediate realities and complexities of the lives of children, parents, teachers are so daunting that we often find gaps between formulations and realizations of inclusive education. The current debate that confronts us is no longer about what inclusion is and why it is needed. The key question is how it is to be achieved. The range of socio-economically disadvantaged group categories that the policy addresses is quite vast, and Anita ma'am has already talked about these groups. At the outset, I would like to briefly reflect on the SEDG student-related challenges. The success of an inclusive school depends considerably on early identification, assessment, and stimulation of the very young child with special educational needs. Unfortunately, for no fault of students, but due to systemic lacunae, most of our current SEDG students have not undergone programs that promote physical, intellectual, and social development or school readiness. The result is there are huge academic as well as adjustment gaps. They are confronted with a dual burden, one of assimilating themselves in mainstream school culture, often without preparation, and two, dealing with their disability or disadvantage in an intimidating setup and unfamiliar stimuli. If we look at the challenges, we will find that they are more a consequence of societal and familial attitudes. I wouldn't like to dwell too much in detail on these student-related challenges because the fault lies with the system rather than these students. I would just like to talk about a mainstream school in Delhi where there were examples of disruptive behavior on part of a student who suffered from ADHD, and he couldn't really sit at one place. He would throw things at others to seek attention. He only invited the offense of others. Parents were immediately summoned, and he got into an argument with the teachers who insisted that he enrolls the kid in a special school. His teachers do say that he was quick at finishing blackboard work, and after that he would seek attention in these ways. The child needed attention, understanding, and time, which no one could give him at that moment. Are we then really following inclusive practices? And the question remains, if not, why not? There are numerous challenges in a real inclusive classroom. Lack of teacher competence in identifying the different categories of SEDGs or the type of learners may lead to a failure in planning and applying varied and befitting strategies for each category of such a student in the class. The ground reality is that in a regular classroom, the teacher is often unable to cater to the needs of a late bloomer, let alone a disabled or disadvantaged learner. So this would be a bigger challenge. Teachers find themselves frustratingly ill-equipped and lacking in the necessary drive as they have no training and experience in setting up an inclusive classroom or dealing with severe disabilities. nor are they prepared in the basic practices of curriculum adaptation, collaborative skills, and universal design to build a new inclusive school culture. Also, since there is no accountability, the teacher might not, there's no accountability that the teacher might be anxious about. Another question that troubles me, that when training is really planned, will it be for a selective number of teachers or for all? What will be the criteria of choosing teachers for training purposes? There is a limited number of qualified and trained teachers as well as special needs educators vis-a-vis class size and the number of SEDG children enrolled in the school. I know of a mainstream school in Delhi that has a student with impaired limbs whose mother sits through the school hours to take care of his essential needs. She actually lifts him up and takes him to his class on the first floor at the beginning of the day and brings him down at the end of the day. Similarly, there is another student in the same school who mounts the stairs using a walker with the help only from classmates. Is it really impossible to carry out a periodic school-wise and class-wise analysis to assess the number of special educators and support staff required? Breaking stereotypes regarding how the SDGs are perceived can't really be a one-step goal, but a process. Teaching students the values of treating others with compassion and respect, regardless of their ability, will be an ongoing and time-consuming process that will witness a series of failures before we can really claim to have achieved inclusiveness. In the present scenario, we had children rushing to the staff room with complaints against the different child, reflecting that they are not yet ready to accept the new normal. Ideally, teachers will need to make individualized lesson plans to address the needs of SEDGs. There is an inappropriate teacher-student ratio in our classes, sometimes over 1:60, and teachers are burdened with additional tasks too. A teacher gets sometimes not even half a minute with each student. Is it then impractical to expect that they can implement inclusive education without adequate support? Will there be enough drive and commitment in them to cope with the workload and time on their hands to do so? The questions that are likely to resonate from the teachers are, how shall we complete the syllabus with this additional work to do and with a significant quantum of each teaching hour spent on attending to the differently abled in the class? Dealing with the parents of SEDGs is a multi-level challenge. On the one hand is the challenge of encouraging parents to bring their child with a disability to school and ensuring their cooperation and collaboration. On the other hand is the challenge of handling opposition of parents on classification of their wards as SEDGs. Then there is the challenge of convincing the parents of other students who are opposed to the idea of peer tutoring and buddy help for fear that their own child might lag behind due to this. It will take long to convince them that their own kids' emotional quotient and leadership qualities, empathy, etc. are going to be adequately built if they do so. The greatest challenge is to bring an attitudinal transformation in everyone, especially teachers, who because of societal norms have an exclusionary attitude. Inefficiency and lack of training only adds to it. Unless they are positive, patient and empathetic, they won't be able to create a bias-free atmosphere in the class. They will have to be willing to spend time and plan their classes for the needs of every student and also develop a plan to reinforce teaching to ensure achievement of learning outcomes up to the requisite level. Schools where infrastructural provisions like friendly campuses, toilets and other facilities do not exist will require a complete overhauling. While the policy provides for ensuring this, sometimes the paperwork and process either delays the actual implementation or sends the matter to cold storage. Unsuitable classroom learning environment is another challenge. Large class size, less time and lack of teaching materials hampers the seamless transactional flow that is expected in an inclusive class. We are also restricted by constraints of time. The necessary communication or dialogue that must ensue between teachers and learners, or the free interaction between SEDGs and other children, so imperative for their holistic growth and amalgamation into the class, if deficient, will become an obstacle. In view of these challenges, it is a systemic change that is required. The entire institutional machinery must be geared to achieve the said target. The policy on inclusive and equitable education is very comprehensively designed and provides for a very well-planned resolution of all the challenges projected here. Anita ma'am has already talked about the lacunae that existed are being adequately covered by the NAP, be it flexible curriculum, training, bridging gaps, infrastructure, resources, facilities, funds, and incentives. However, implementation is what needs to be the focus. How do we achieve that? However much a policy might provide for, resistance to change has to be overcome. Attitudes, beliefs, and mindsets can't be offered on a platter. They have to be cultivated. Attitudinal barriers, rigid and regressive mindsets, and societal norms need breaking down for inclusion to become an ideology. I would like to share a success story of a teacher affecting a huge behavioral change in a disruptive student suffering from ADHD in our own school. In class 6, his newly recruited teacher had loads of complaints and anger against him. The collaboration of a new, more positive and compassionate set of teachers changed him into a darling of the class. We all noted, marked, and celebrated the transformation in him. Partnerships with parents, inviting ideas from them and their involvement in the form of appreciation and encouragement is necessary so that they are engaged with the child's educational journey. During PTMs, they can be given tangible evidence that yes, their child can and will succeed in life. To overcome challenges and build bridges for a better society, a culture of inclusivity and equity must be created and established. Inclusion is not a one-off fragile arrangement that may return to a default segregation position at any moment. We will know that inclusiveness has embedded and annealed into our mindset when the term itself becomes obsolete. This will only happen when all stakeholders, including school leaders, general educators, special educators, administrators, support professionals, students, parents, unify in active commitment to developing and maintaining classrooms and schools that support all the students while respecting and appreciating the socio-economic, biological, and cultural diversity of the school community. It will be a good idea to create an inclusive practices support team wherein teachers, special educators, and teaching assistants collaborate to encourage inclusion and transcend diversity throughout the school. Instead of just an odd session on inclusive education, which is what happens in the in-service courses today, intensive training in differentiated instruction, cooperative learning, curricular accommodations is essential for effective implementation of inclusive and equitable education. It will provide teachers with an insight and prepare them for their new roles. Training will be even more effective if it is replicated periodically, not only to make the teacher cognizant of new trends in inclusiveness, but also to ensure that they don't give up out of fear of failure or frustration. It will also help to make the teachers more accountable. To build a society that accords value to everyone, I think we need to learn inclusivity from children who are naturally inclusive. They love and offer themselves unconditionally without bias. A teacher's role is certainly irreplaceable when we talk about implementation of the policy. What is expected is a positive classroom behavior.
When we are crossing the time,
I'll quickly finish. School systems must work towards shedding orthodox methods and old techniques of assessment and evaluation. Outcomes of inclusive education are often elusive and difficult to measure. Student tests of content knowledge provide only one indicator of the problem. Solving skills needed for survival are not covered. The challenge is to measure success in terms of broad indicators of outcome and impact. Supporting and empowering teachers and incentivizing them through small gestures of appreciation will keep them galvanized into positive action. I would just like to say, if we are creating unorthodox classrooms, we need to break old cliched molds of judgment for teachers too, in order for the magic and miracle of a teacher's influence to unravel. Training sessions for them must include authentic examples of what the features of inclusive classes are, so that the learner-centered schools are created and popularized. Lastly, celebrating success stories of inclusive education can help in overcoming challenges too. Good practices must be carefully analyzed and promoted. Diversity, not standard solutions to complex problems, must be the norm. Together, we can achieve the dream of inclusiveness and equity and lay the foundation for a dynamic, egalitarian, and equitable society. APJ Abdul Kalam said, "Man needs his difficulties because they are necessary to enjoy success. And every accomplishment starts with the decision to try." I would like to end with a quote. Inclusion is not a strategy to help people fit into the systems and structures which exist in our societies. It is about transforming those systems and structures to make it better for everyone. Inclusion is about creating a better world for everyone. Let us then embrace diversity, practice equality, respect, justice, and tolerance. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vimi. And I am so, I would like to acknowledge the excellent presentations and my eminent speakers of this session. While Professor Smriti Saroop talked about, creating an inclusive culture, leading to an inclusive society, she also talked about important components of inclusive education being access, participation, and achieving learning outcomes. And her 6 E's and her 5 R's and BASK, which means, belief, skills, knowledge, and also, her pedagogical intervention she talked about were excellent, and I'm sure our teachers will benefit from her presentation. While Anupam did talk about universal design and the effective classroom, she very well presented what is meant by universal design of learning. She also talked about how important it is to have this kind of design to overcome challenges in the classroom. And she talked about the exemplar material prepared by NCERT, where all kind of representation, through various learning styles and the various ways of presentation and various ways of demonstrating knowledge can be all combined into teaching learning materials. And Vimi was excellent in talking about the challenges faced in the classroom, where she talked about not only challenges but also how to overcome these challenges. And her main thing was, in spite of these challenges, if implementation of policy is well done and there is collaboration and parental partnership, success will be achieved. And for that, it is important to, encourage our teachers, provide incentives, and also give them, actually demonstrate through examples how inclusion can be achieved. So I'm grateful to all my speakers, and now we will end this session. Thank you so much. Does anybody else want to add anything to it? Or, कुछ बोलना है, मतलब 11:15 तक था. So I don't know. Do we can take some questions or anything?
I think you've summed up everything. You have summed up the session
Yeah. So thank you so much then. Is there any question? Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
ये आएगा ये आता रहेगा.
उन लोगों को ज्वाइन कराने वो लोग ऑलरेडी आ गए हैं.
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, sir. Very good morning to Professor Chahal, Professor Psychology.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to all of you, please.
Good morning.
प्रोफेसर चहल साहब सुन पा रहे हैं?
Good morning. Good morning.
हाँ सर, आप अपना कैमरा ऑन करेंगे?
हाँ, मेरा कैमरा ऑन है.
नहीं आ रही.
तेरी?
और प्रोफेसर सालुंके साहब?
हाँ, यस.
हाँ सर, आपका कैमरा ऑन है, आप नजर नहीं आ रहे.
हाँ, नहीं कैमरा ऑन है, हम दिख भी रहे हैं.
स्क्रीन पे लेके आए.
सालुंके साहब और चहल साहब का कैमरा ऑन नहीं है, वो उन्होंने ऑन कर रखा है, लेकिन वो
चहल साहब दिख रहे. नहीं, हमें तो चहल साहब भी दिख रहे हैं.
डॉक्टर त्रिपाठी साहब, वो हम तीनों देख रहे हैं स्क्रीन पे और आप भी देख रहे हैं.
हम आपको नहीं देख पा रहे हैं सर. मैंने अभी वहाँ बात कर रहा हूँ एजुकेशन.
जी, अपने सिस्टम में देखिए, अपने सिस्टम में देखिए. मैं भी अपने कंप्यूटर पे विजिबल हूँ, डॉक्टर सोलंकी भी विजिबल हैं, डॉक्टर कुमार भी यही हैं और आप भी हमें दिखाई दे रहे हैं.
चहल साहब और सालुंके साहब हाँ ऑन किए हुए. ठीक ठीक. प्रोफेसर सालुंके साहब, चहल साहब एंड कयास साहब तीनों लोग जुड़ गए हैं हमारे साथ.
Yes, we are here already.
थैंक यू सर. वी वेलकम यू.
Thank you.
आपको पता है शिक्षा मंत्रालय और जो है यूजीसी मिलकर के उच्चतर शिक्षा में ये शिक्षक पर्व के उपलक्ष्य में शिक्षक पर्व मना रहे हैं हम 5 से 25 सितंबर के बीच. और उसी की एक कड़ी है आज की ये वेबिनार 9 सितंबर को, जिसका के टॉपिक है समता में समता एवं समावेश. तो इस उपलक्ष्य में सर आपका हम स्वागत करते हैं और मैं अपने अध्यक्ष सचिव महोदय माननीय प्रोफेसर रजनीश जैन जी से अनुरोध कर रहा हूं कि वो इंट्रोडक्शन दे इसका और इसके ओपनिंग रिमार्क दे प्लीज। प्रोफेसर रजनीश जैन जी।
आप सभी को मेरा नमस्कार। विश्वविद्यालय अनुदान आयोग और मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एजुकेशन की तरफ से मैं आप सभी का यहाँ पे हार्दिक स्वागत करता हूँ। आज के कार्यक्रम में हमारे साथ हमारे अतिथि जुड़े हुए हैं। हमारे 3 विशिष्ट अतिथि हैं आज। पहले अतिथि हैं हमारे प्रोफेसर एस चहल, जो फॉर्मर वाइस चांसलर हैं महाराणा प्रताप यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर एंड टेक्निकल यूनिवर्सिटी उदयपुर के। प्रोफेसर चहल, आपका स्वागत करते हैं हम यहाँ पे। हमारे साथ प्रोफेसर एम सालुंखे भी जुड़े हुए हैं, जो वाइस चांसलर हैं भारतीय विद्यापीठ पुणे यूनिवर्सिटी के, और आप फॉर्मर प्रेसिडेंट भी रहे हैं AIU के, और इसके अलावा आप और कई जगह वाइस चांसलर भी रह चुके हैं। आपका भी हम आज के कार्यक्रम में स्वागत करते हैं। हमारे साथ में प्रोफेसर विजय कुमार कयात जी भी हैं, जो चौधरी देवीलाल यूनिवर्सिटी सिरसा के फॉर्मर वाइस चांसलर हैं। हम आपका भी इस कार्यक्रम में स्वागत करते हैं। जैसा हम सभी जानते हैं, राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति 2020 इसका फॉर्मली लॉन्च हो चुका है। माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी के अध्यक्षता में जो समिति बनी थी, और उसमें प्रोफेसर कस्तूरी रंगन जी की अध्यक्षता में जो ड्राफ्टिंग कमेटी ने ड्राफ्ट तैयार किया था, उसको फॉर्मली लॉन्च कर दिया गया है। और इस बारे में पूरे देश भर में कई अलग अलग वेबिनार हो चुके हैं, और कुछ वेबिनार्स में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने स्वयं देश को संबोधित किया है, और उन्होंने राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति के अलग अलग प्रावधानों के बारे में भी विस्तार पूर्वक चर्चा की है। कुछ दिन पहले ही इसके बारे में माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने एक अलग से विशेष वेबिनार किया था, और उस वेबिनार में भी इसके बारे में बताया था। और अभी कुछ दिन पहले माननीय राष्ट्रपति जी ने और माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने भी देश के सभी राज्यों के गवर्नर के साथ में, उच्च शिक्षा मंत्रियों के साथ में, और जितने भी विश्वविद्यालय के कुलपति हैं उनके साथ में भी चर्चा करके इसके इम्प्लीमेंटेशन के बारे में रणनीति के अलग अलग आयामों पे विचार विमर्श किया और उनके सुझाव मांगे। और जैसा हम सभी जानते हैं, इस शिक्षा नीति में समग्रता की बात की गई है। ये शिक्षा नीति दूरगामी है, भविष्यगामी है, और सभी को एक साथ लेकर क्वालिटी हायर एजुकेशन फॉर ऑल की बात करती है। अभी हम हायर एजुकेशन पे फोकस कर रहे हैं, हम क्वालिटी हायर एजुकेशन की बात कर रहे हैं यहाँ पे। और इस एजुकेशन पॉलिसी में सभी जितने भी पॉसिबल डायमेंशंस हो सकते हैं, सभी डायमेंशंस में रिफॉर्म्स की बात की है, चाहे वो एकेडमिक रिफॉर्म्स हो, इंस्टीट्यूशनल रिफॉर्म्स हो, चाहे वो गवर्नेंस रिलेटेड रिफॉर्म्स हो, चाहे वो रिसर्च रिलेटेड रिफॉर्म्स हो। तो अलग अलग डायमेंशंस के सभी रिफॉर्म्स की भी चर्चा की गई है। ये कोशिश की गई है कि इसमें इस तरह के प्रावधान आए, इस तरह की बातें आए, या इस तरह की नीतियां बने, जिससे कि हम अपनी शिक्षण संस्थाओं को विश्व स्तर पर सर्वश्रेष्ठ शिक्षण संस्थाओं के रूप में हम उन्हें स्थापित कर सकें। आज के इस विशेष सत्र में जब हम आज एक मुख्य बिंदु के ऊपर चर्चा करेंगे, आज समता और समावेश यानी कि इक्विटी और इंक्लूजन के ऊपर हमारा डिस्कशन का फोकस होगा, जिसके लिए हमारे 3 विशेष आमंत्रित अतिथि यहाँ पर हैं। और इसके बारे में जब हम चर्चा करेंगे तो राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति में जो इसमें प्रावधान नियत किए हैं और इससे रिलेटेड, इससे संबंधित जितने विषय हैं उसके बारे में हम सभी चर्चा करेंगे, हम सभी जानेंगे, समझेंगे, और आपके विचार भी जानेंगे। इससे जुड़ी हुई चुनौतियों के बारे में भी हम समझेंगे, जिससे कि हम एक इस तरह के माहौल का निर्माण कर सकें जहां पे किसी भी तरह के छात्र या छात्राएं या शिक्षक वर्ग या इससे संबंधित कोई भी हो, उसको सभी प्रकार की अपॉर्चुनिटीज मिले। It should provide equal opportunity to all and equal access to all in terms of diversity, in terms of socially, economically disadvantaged groups, or in terms of any disparity or any other kind of disadvantage, so that everybody comes at the same level and gets the same opportunity in terms of getting quality higher education. So here we'll be also dealing with various initiatives which government has taken or is planning to take. At the same time, what institution should do in terms of providing some kind of financial assistance or gender balance, or in terms of creating infrastructural facility for person with disability or Divyangjan, or will also be discussing about various dimensions in order to create a congenial atmosphere in which everybody can come together and in a very cordial and congenial atmosphere provide education and receive education. So without taking much time, now I request Dr. Jiten Tripathi to briefly introduce our panel to the audience. आज मैं एक बार फिर से आप सभी का और आज इस वेबिनार के माध्यम से जितने भी लोग हमारे साथ में जुड़े हुए हैं अलग अलग विश्वविद्यालयों से, सभी सम्मानित अतिथियों का मैं एक बार पुनः स्वागत करता हूं और उम्मीद करता हूं कि आज का वेबिनार और जो चर्चा होगी वो सभी के लिए बहुत लाभदायक होगी। आप सभी को एक बार पुनः नमस्कार।
Thank you very much to respected Secretary sir. As you are aware, sir, Secretary sir has given very detailed background of this about this webinar, which is based on the national education policy. Now, as I was directed, I will introduce our moderator and speakers. In this occasion, sir, first of all, I welcome our secretary, honorable moderator, speakers, vice chancellors, academicians, students, and all the participants who are taking part in this webinar. Thank you very much and I welcome you. जैसा कि आप सबको से पता है, शिक्षा मंत्रालय और विश्वविद्यालय अनुदान आयोग इस शिक्षक पर्व पर 5 से 25 सितंबर के बीच बहुत सारी वेबिनार हम लोग आयोजित कर रहे हैं जो अलग अलग विषय पर होंगे, लेकिन उनका मूल जो आधार है वो राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति पर आधारित है। इस वेबिनार में सबसे पहले मैं स्वागत करता हूं माननीय प्रोफेसर एस चहल साहब का, जो कि पहले कुलपति थे महाराजा प्रताप यूनिवर्सिटी ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर एंड टेक्नोलॉजी उदयपुर। प्रोफेसर चहल साहब हमारे बहुत सारे समितियों से जुड़े रहे हैं और जाने माने एकेडमिशियन हैं, और सबसे अच्छी बात है कि ही इज ए वेरी गुड ह्यूमन बीइंग। तो सर आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत, और इतने छोटे नोटिस पर आपने हमारा अनुरोध स्वीकार किया, इसके लिए बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। तो आज इस वेबिनार में प्रोफेसर चहल साहब मॉडरेट करेंगे और पूरी सेमिनार का समय समय पर वो निर्देश देते रहेंगे। हमारे दूसरे स्पीकर होंगे पहले प्रोफेसर सांकुले साहब और दूसरे स्पीकर होंगे प्रोफेसर विजय कुमार कायक जी। प्रोफेसर सांकुले साहब doesn't require any introduction. He is well-known person. He was the founder, vice chancellor of Central University of Rajasthan, और इससे पहले वो और एसोसिएशन ऑफ इंडियन यूनिवर्सिटीज के प्रेसिडेंट भी रहे हैं। प्रोफेसर सांकुले शिवाजी यूनिवर्सिटी कोल्हापुर के भी वाइस चांसलर रहे, जहां से उन्होंने पीएचडी की थी, उसी विश्वविद्यालय में वो चांसलर रहे हैं। And he was also the vice chancellor of Yashwantrao Chauhan Open University, Nasik, and also Symbiosis University Indore। इस तरीके से वो 5 विश्वविद्यालयों के वाइस चांसलर रहे हैं, और जहां से उन्होंने पीएचडी की उस विश्वविद्यालय के भी वाइस चांसलर रहे हैं। उनके बहुत सारे पब्लिकेशन नेशनल और इंटरनेशनल जर्नल में है। तो प्रोफेसर सांकुले साहब आपका बहुत बहुत स्वागत इस वेबिनार में पार्टिसिपेट करने के लिए और एज ए स्पीकर हमारा अनुरोध स्वीकार करने के लिए बहुत बहुत स्वागत सर, धन्यवाद। प्रोफेसर कयात साहब वाइस चांसलर रहे हैं चौधरी देवीलाल यूनिवर्सिटी सिरसा हरियाणा में, और हमारे साथ कई समितियों से जुड़े रहे समय समय पर, और उन्होंने बाबा साहब भीमराव अंबेडकर की किताबों पर और उनके अध्ययन पर कार्यों पर काफी कार्य भी किया है, जो कि इस वेबिनार से भी संबंधित है। तो प्रोफेसर कायद साहब का मैं स्वागत और बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूं कि इस छोटे समय में उन्होंने हमारा अनुरोध स्वीकार किया। तो इस तरीके से इस वेबिनार में दो लोग स्पीकर होंगे, प्रोफेसर सांकुले साहब और प्रोफेसर कयास साहब, और प्रोफेसर चहल साहब मॉडरेटर होंगे। जैसा कि हमने शेड्यूल आपके साथ ऑलरेडी शेयर किया हुआ है सर, तो मैं आपसे अनुरोध करूंगा कि उसी शेड्यूल के हिसाब से समय की सीमा को देखते हुए कृपया आप संचालन करें और प्रोग्राम को, वेबिनार को शुरुआत करें। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद आप सभी का और स्वागत है सर। शुरुआत करिए प्रोफेसर चहल साहब।
सबसे पहले मैं अपना आभार प्रकट करता हूं डॉक्टर रजनीश जैन जी से, जो सेक्रेटरी हैं यूनिवर्सिटी ग्रांट कमीशन के, और जिन्होंने बहुत ही एक अच्छे ढंग से जो है ये टॉपिक जो है वो उसको इंट्रोड्यूस किया है। He has introduced this very well, and he has very rightly said that this new education policy 2020, the final document is already with us now, which has been approved by the union government. And on the basis, he has rightly mentioned, this is its importance in this way, that on the basis of these provisions which are made in the new education policies, different policies have to be formulated by the Ministry and the University Grant Commission, and even universities and colleges. These have to be formulated for the implementation. So that is why these seminars, these are being organized to sensitize all the stakeholders. This is the main objectives of these meetings. Thank you very much, Dr. Jain ji, for introducing the topic very well. डॉक्टर जितेंद्र त्रिपाठी जी, जॉइंट सेक्रेटरी साहब ने आपने बताया जो इसका जो स्ट्रक्चर है, और थैंक यू वेरी मच फॉर इंट्रोड्यूसिंग ऑल द थ्री स्पीकर्स विच विल बी हियर ऑन द टुडे विद these participants who are with us, who have joined this meeting and this webinar. No, first of all, I will just mention a few words, that time is very limited. And dear friends and participants, this equity and inclusion, these are a few of the very important pillars around which the new education policy 2020, this has been woven. We all know this new education policy. We were all participating in different meetings for the last 3-4 years very actively, and after this lot of discussion, this new policy has come up, and different provisions have been made in this. Now, this policy has been introduced after 34 years of gap. Last policy that was in 1986. So this policy will be replacing that policy which was there in 1986, and many new provisions have been made to make this India a vibrant country so far as a higher education and school education is concerned. The beauty of this policy is that the school education and higher education, they unite between the two. That is very, very important, and it has been visualized that unless it is done, new education policy emphasize on this, that unless this is done, we cannot succeed in our endeavors in education. Friends, we are all still having large-scale societal disparities. There are good numbers of societal economically disadvantaged groups, and these are, we generally refer to as SCDGs. And there are large number of these such groups which need attention. Unless they are looked into, unless we take this along with everyone, we can't succeed in our endeavors. We are experiencing social tensions. And then new education policy 22, because of this disparities, it has been focused to mitigate this type of disruption and tensions through education, school education as well as higher education. In this limited time, we will focus on these important issues and how to achieve these objectives in best possible way. As this has been introduced along with me, there are two very learned and experienced speakers, Professor Mankara Solanki ji and Vijay Kumar Kayat ji. Both of the speakers, they will be with us, and they will be speaking after I just take briefly. I will focus just on experiences, what we are having, because this is, at the same time, we should be very much aware, but this is something not very new. We have to take up what we have already done, and we have to take up those things and very effectively. We have to analyze where we couldn't do anything so that we can do that thing very effectively. So what is the way forward in higher education so far as equity and inclusiveness is concerned? After this, I will be requesting Professor Solanki and Professor Kyatji. Professor Solanki, he will be dwelling on the equity and inclusion. What are the provisions in new education policies and how to achieve it? And Professor Kyat, he will focus on challenges which we can realize for achieving the objectives which has been mentioned in new education policy. So this important document will see while discussing some experiences and way forward for equity and inclusiveness in higher education. It is very, very important to and foremost to look at these dimensions of present higher education systems in the country. My dear friends, this system has seen tremendous growth in recent past. With just having 20 universities at the time of independence, we are having 9,000 universities and 42,500 plus colleges in the country. Now this side of higher education has grown tremendously. After this beginning of this century, there was a steep growth in the first decade. So this trend is the continued after 2010 also, when they steadily. And National Knowledge Commission, as we know, that it recommended that there is need to enhance the gross enrollment ratio. That ratio has reached up to 24% now. However, this GER, what we call, it is variable with various sectors within various socio-economic and religious groups, different religions. So this group variation, when we look into this, is great so far as GER is concerned. Various occupational groups, for example, in agriculture labor, it is just 7%. Self-employed, like non-agriculture, it is 14%. And self-employed, it is just 16%. So this is very much, there is great divide between rural and urban people so far as the GER is concerned. It's more in urban and less in rural area. We are visualizing is this, that we increase this GER, but we have to see that GER should be equitable and it should be equally distributed. There is clear divide between rural and urban, as I explained, men and women, and also socially, economically deprived groups. Now, this new education policy 2020, it aims at for building equitable, inclusive, and plural society with an increased gross enrollment ratio of 50% by 2035. This has been envisioned in this policy. And what are the experiences? I have just taken one important examples. We just look at the previous efforts made in the equity and inclusion, that we see that it included inclusive growth of higher education, that is number one. Then expanding higher education institutes to eliminate regional imbalances, that was number two. And number three, making higher education accessible to all socio-economic strata of the society and improving quality of higher education. These 4 points were there. The major development, of course, took up in the last years, and from 2007 onwards, when the central government has set up centers for study of social exclusion and inclusive policy for creating comfortable environment for all sections of the society. There are 35 such centers under University Grant Commission guidelines which are working under in the country. Main objective of these centers, that is conceptualizing discrimination and exclusion and inclusion based on caste and religion. That is number one. Number two is development of understanding and discrimination of exclusion. And number three, formulating of policies for protecting the rights of these groups. My dear friends, these centers are mandated to help inclusion through undertaking research projects, organizing national and international conferences, workshops, seminars, and publishing articles, books, and sensitizing the society for creating awareness among people about different disadvantaged groups. Now, it is a third objective which is very, very important, which is most important, that to generate data based on data-based opinion for policymakers to formulate policies on equity and inclusion, which can only bring transformation and levelization. Reaching to the unreached is very, very important and needs taken in effectively with utmost sincerity. Recently, an assessment of progress and achievements of these centers have been made. The centers certainly have potential to make tremendous contribution focusing outcome-based performance. It is important that research project based on data should be gathered to make an important assessment to enhance applicability of various findings. These centers can function more effectively with regular faculty and continuity. Teachers' progression and these programs, these are aimed at equity and inclusion, they need to be reoriented. These centers can play a pivotal role in spreading awareness and to take up useful interventions to upliftment the marginal and disadvantaged society, which of course is more practical and possible with the active involvement of adopting bottom-up approach. We have to take all along. Vibrancy and utility of these centers will be much more if their involvement in policy planning in the state governments, that should be involvement is there, and they're performing in networking mode. Equity and inclusion, in fact, is the heart of New Education Policy 2020 in the field of higher as well as the school education. Inclusion, this aims at its restructuring of the whole system. That is very much desirable. It can be done through introducing this relevant curriculum and pedagogy. It aims at avoiding strengthening and isolation of ethnic and linguistic minorities, and especially abled and those focusing the learning difficulties due to language barrier, and also for those who are at the risk of exclusion. My dear friends, if we see towards this, it is attempted to enhance awareness and community participation. This will help the motivating students and attain knowledge and include human values, empathy, tolerance, gender equality, human rights, and better living by responding to the diversity. Gender equality, of course, that is, and inclusion is very, very important. This can be better attained through addressing exclusion, disparity, marginalization, and vulnerability and inequality in education and access to education, which we need to focus on. Curriculum content can greatly help to eliminate disparity for SCDGs and also sections like transgenders and bringing equality. This can best be where to attain optimal outcome in physical development, cognitive development, socio-emotional, ethical development, and commercialization and communication of this literacy. This is also already mentioned that we are this GER we are achieving through lot of this privatization. In this, commercialization has to be curbed. Education is pivotal for development agenda by bringing reforms and bringing the gender and socio-regional gaps with the community participation. So the way forward, when we look into this, the objective of this inclusiveness in higher education, this can best be achieved through interventions like number one, reduction of regional imbalances, very, very important. Number two, support to institutions located in border, hilly, remote, small towns and educational backward areas. That is, that area needs to be taken along with, because socially deprived and people below poverty line, they need to be taken along with. Support to institutions with large students population and minorities, SEDGs, and physically challenged and girl students. That is very important. There is need to connect the higher education with programs like Beti Bachao, Beti Padhao, and Nanni Chan. These are very important interventions by these groups, and we have to connect our higher education with such interventions at the country level so that we may sensitize and eliminate such menaces. Setting up of equal opportunity offices in higher education institution, that is very well, and also along with this, there must be awareness cells, because awareness is very, very important. There is no awareness. I have worked in tribal areas in Rajasthan where I have seen that people living in urban area and people living in rural area and people living in tribal area, there is a lot of difference. They even don't know what is the where from this electricity is coming, what to talk of other interventions. So we have to take bottom-up approach, and we have to take those people, we have to think the last person in the line so that we may improve our higher education system so far as inclusion and equity is concerned. My dear friends, there are a lot of best practices. Time is very, very limited. I was given 10 minutes, but I have taken 2 minutes more. Sorry for that. And finally, excuse me, but I will not just elaborate. But there are so many best practices in our country and in other countries which have been proved useful for equity and inclusion elsewhere. They should be emulated. They should be incorporated in higher education, in our higher education institution to achieve desirable goals. With this sort of brief this presentation on my thoughts which are coming to equity and inclusion, because time is very short and there is for 15 minutes these are earmarked for Professor Solanki, and with this sort of background, I shall now request Professor Manikrao Solanki, and he will be with us for 15 minutes, and he will discuss that what is the inclusion in the new education policy which need to be incorporated in higher education so that we may make our higher education more relevant, more sort of acceptable. And now higher education, when we look into not only in the new education policy is concerned, but so far as all the educational institutions. And I must say, now, the Honorable Secretary of this University Grant Commission is here with us. We are here, with so many meetings. But I always say that we formulate policies, the interventions, but the correct implementation of these policies is very, very important. I'm sure that all these things and these points which are being taken here, that will be noted down by my friends, and we will proceed further. As the Secretary Sahab has said in the very beginning, that this new education policy, this has come up a document. इससे आगे बहुत सी पॉलिसी जो है इससे आगे बढ़नी है, तो वो पॉलिसी जो है हमारी डिस्कशन के ऊपर, हमारे फीडबैक के ऊपर ही बढ़नी है. This feedback is not from one, but from all the sources, all the principals, all the vice chancellors who are joined with us, who are with us. They can, of course, come and join and send their own views so that these policies, framing of policies for higher education in these colleges and higher education, those should be very vibrant and relevant. So far as equity, inclusiveness is concerned, we generally talk about the 3 E's: equity, expansion, and excellence. Unless equity, of course, is first among these. Unless equity is there, we can't say, unless we remove this disparity, we can't say our higher education is more relevant. Expansion, we have witnessed, but I think we have a lot to do in so far as equity, inclusiveness is concerned. This has to be taken care of. And if this is not there, I'm sure that we can't achieve excellence. Thank you very much. I pass it over to Professor Solanki ji.
Very good morning. Professor Rajni Jain, Honorable Secretary, University Grants Commission, Moderator, Professor Chal, my colleague, Professor Vijay Kumar Kahat, participants, ladies and gentlemen. It is indeed a pleasure to be a part of a webinar on inclusion equity organized by Ministry of Education and University Grants Commission. I would like to talk with famous quote by Mahatma Gandhi. We must be the change that we wish to see in the world. The NEP 2020 focuses on to provide quality education with lifelong learning opportunities to all the age group of students, all categories of the students, as rightly said by our Honorable Prime Minister. Therefore, Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas. Therefore, I am thankful to organizers for giving me opportunity to talk such an important topic, inclusion, equity in education policy, in this webinar. National education policy is a welcome step to meet the changing dynamics of population requirements with regard to quality education, innovation, and research, and all aspirants with equity and inclusiveness, aiming to make India a knowledge superpower as per the vision of Honorable Prime Minister. She mentioned that national education policy shift from how to think to how to think. What to think to how to think. The goal of
Professor Slankiji, you are not visible on the screen.
Okay. Yes. Okay. In the conference organized for all the state governments and vice chancellors on September 7, our Prime Minister has mentioned the students will be capable with help of this NEP clearly indicate equity and inclusiveness. Friends, as of now, government has introduced various policies. Over the years, at the outset, I would like to thank Ministry of Education, Government of India bringing out NEP, which will truly transform education system in country. One unique thing about this education policy is very wide consultation was carried out. Being academician, each one of us will have a question like what are the new key highlights in NEP, particularly about equity and inclusion in the diverse and pluralistic country like India. What are the challenges in implementation of it? In Indian society, in which the members of diverse ethnic, racial, religious or social groups maintain their autonomous participation in development of their traditional culture and special interest within the confines of common civilization. New education policies will be certainly a landmark in the history of education in India. This is the first policy of 21st century replaces 34-year-old NEP 1986, built on foundation pillar of access, equity, quality, affordability, and accountability. The committee under chairmanship of Kasturi has done commendable job. It is rightfully a balance of rootedness and pride in India, as well as acceptance of the best ideas and practices in the world of learning across the globe. The policy affirms the beginning of social category gaps in access, participation and learning outcomes in school education will continue to be one of the major goals of education sector development. As per the UNESCO, ensuring that each individual has equal opportunity for educational progress remains the challenge worldwide. Sustainable Development Goal number 4 on education and Education 2030 Framework for Action emphasizes inclusion and equity as laying foundations for quality education. As per UNICEF organization, nearly half of the pre-age children around the world are not enrolled in preschool. In low-income countries, only 1 to 5 children are enrolled. Children from poor families are the least likely to attend early childhood education in the program. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization say that inclusion, that is origins in special education. The development of this field of education has involved a series of stages during which education system has explored different ways of responding to the learning. Special education practices were moved into the mainstream through approach known as integration. I feel, therefore, out of 60-page national education policy, 4 pages are exclusive on equity and inclusive education. It is clearly indicates the appropriate weightage has been given for this important issue. Access education encourages variety of pedagogical approaches to accomplish the dissemination of knowledge across the diversity of social, culture, social, national and biological backgrounds, what Professor Chahal has mentioned. Equal opportunity access, inclusion of the students with learning and physical and mental disabilities. The themes governing universal access to education have expanded across all forms of ability and diversity. However, as definition of diversity is within itself is broad, amalgamation of teachers exercising universal access with continuity, face challenges and incorporate adjustment in their lesson plan, foster themes of equal opportunity of education. Friends, an equal education will help the students to develop knowledge, skills they need to be engaged and become productive members of society. An equitable start would lead to better economic and social outcome for individuals, for region, and for our nation. We should talk about the equity in education. We usually mean something similar to fairness. The term inclusion captures in one word as an embracing societal ideology regarding individuals with disabilities, special education. Inclusion secures opportunity for students in disabilities to learn alongside their non-disabled peer in general education classroom. The committee has taken into account 2016-17 report of Unified District Information on School Education as a base for policy framing. As per the data, 19.6% of the students belong to scheduled caste at primary level, but this fraction falls to 17.3 at higher secondary level. This enrollment dropout are more severe for scheduled tribe students, 10.6% to 6.8%, and differently able children 1.1% to 0.25%, with even greater decline for female students within each of these categories. The decline in enrollment in higher education is more steeper. The committee has considered the factors of multiplicity, including lack of access of quality school, poverty, social mores and customs, language, as they are detrimental effects on the rates of enrollment and retention among SC/ST and students with disabilities. Therefore, separate strategy has been formulated for focused attention on reducing the social category gaps in school education. The critical problem and the recommendation regarding early childhood care education, foundation literacy and numeracy access enrollment and attendance discussed in chapter 1.3 are particularly relevant and more important for unprecedented and disadvantaged groups. Therefore, the measures from chapters 1 to 3 are targeted in concerted way to socio-economical disadvantaged groups. The NEP 2020 emphasizes on ensuring universal access to the school education at all levels, preschool or secondary levels, with 100% GR in school education by 2030. About 2 crore dropouts from the school children will be brought back into the mainstream under NEP 2020. NEP has a provisions that provide the students with increased flexibility and choice of subject to study across all the streams. A strong base early childhood education from 3 to promote better overall learning development, or 85% of child's cumulative brain development occurs prior to age 6, indicating the critical importance of appropriate care and simulations of brain in the early years in order to ensure healthy brain development of growth. Every student in grade 5 and beyond will achieve foundational literacy and numeracy. All the children will thus become urgent national mission. The school curricula pedagogy will aim holistic development of learners to equip them with 21st between arts, science, and between curricular and extracurricular. There will be no rigid separation between vocational and academic streams. The policy has emphasized mother tongue, local language, and at least till grade 5, but preferably till grade 8 beyond. This is a welcome step as mother tongue plays highly critical role in overall development of the child. It is widely noticed that the parents who can afford their children to English medium, today's generation is aspirational and want to educate themselves in English medium schools as they pursue that knowledge of English is essential to get well-paying job. The policy aims at providing education in mother tongue is the school level, focuses on revamping curriculum. However, it is important to note that critical shortage of trained teachers at ground level, salaries of the teachers at Anganwadi we have to consider, and midday meal require dependence on the current economic state and resource allocation. At present, Right to Education Act needs to relook in order to implement the provisions in new education policy. Now I will focus on national education policy through disability lens. 72% of Indian disabled children between 0 to 5 years miss out an education, while 61% of disabled children between 5 to 19 years attend school, says a United Nations report. I think this will be achieved as a digital connectivity has become educational imperative. Education must include digital literacy if our children are to be provided with access to sources of knowledge. A dedicated unit purpose coordinating infrastructure, digital content, capacity building will be created to look after the e-education needs of both school and higher education. An autonomous body, National Education Technology Forum, will be created to provide platform for the free exchange of ideas on the use of technology to enhance learning, assessment, planning, administration. Appropriate integration of technology into all levels of education will be done to improve classroom process, support teacher professional development.
Kindly conclude, sir.
I'm sure this will increase equity and inclusion as a technology is changing fast. We need quality teachers who understand their role in building the character and careers. There is not enough teachers in training institute. In absence of quality training institutions making education a national priority, none of the roles predicted in NAP can be realized. I think we need a 360-degree change in mindset to implement this ideas in context and exactly what our education system requires. I am positive that in country like India, which is currently transforming, taking rapid stride toward the economic development, technological progress and technology will make it convenient for implementation of National Education Policy 20. I will end my talk with famous quote of Winston Churchill: "There is nothing wrong with change if the change in the right direction." And with this new education policies, we are moving in the right direction. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Solanki ji. You have very well focused that change is must and change is difficult. It's very well known, but new education policy that can play a great role, and it's a key for transformation. You are rightly said. It's accountability you have mentioned. Of course, this will be implemented. And sustainable development goal, what you have called, it is very, very important that higher education should focus on this, that we have to achieve sustainable development goal, which has been mentioned, which is very, very important when assessment has been made. Special education practices, you have talked about equal opportunities. These are, of course, very, very all important. This is what we are discussing here. You have very rightly said that school education and it's very important, and we have to focus on dropouts. Dropouts is large. This is sort of what we call SCDGs. A lot of dropouts are from these groups. So that has to be seen. There is a lack of good school because of this. We certainly know that in these groups and deprived section, they have to walk miles and miles even now to reach these school. That is very, very important to take care of. School category, social category gap that has to be built up. Early childhood care is very important to motivate the children to education. And know this, when we come to dropout, it's very important. We are sure now very well known that 10+2 system has totally been reoriented in schools. So this will be a new system. And there will be in higher education, there will be exit options. This is very, very important when we say that dropouts, that can be minimized. If somebody doesn't want to go, he can be taken out and he will be given diploma, degree, certificate and all this. So this will be vocational education that will get a lot of push because of this. And then medium of instruction, you have touched very, very important issue. This is a welcome step in the new education policy, that with this, there will be in mother tongue, this early education, that will lot of motivation for students will be there. and the understanding of the fact that will be much more, that level will be more, and disabled children have to be looked into, and quality teachers are, of course, these are backbone of higher education, not higher education, but all type of higher education. This is very important. Time is very short, otherwise we can discuss this topic for hours and hours. There's so many points which need discussion. I will request the Secretary by University Grant Commission to organize separate set of discussion on such topic where we spend much more time. But anyway, I shall now invite one of our next honorable speaker, Mr. Vijay Kumar Kyachi. He has already been introduced, and he will dwell more upon what are the challenges, what are the, of course, bottlenecks, because we have to achieve what has been mentioned in national education policy. I never visualized that any policy, any 100% achieved, but even if you achieved 90%, 80%, this is much greater sort of things and higher percentage of this. But how best this can be achieved, what are the challenges, what are the bottlenecks? That is why we will concentrate more on this. There are so many government intervention where you can see that there should be financial implication, more scholarship. University Grant Commission is already offering these things. How these can be enhanced? There are certain, of course, government interventions. How this can be best implemented? There are certain higher education and these samples, the sort of intervention, how these can be simple. No, the restructure of University Grant Commission that is already visualized in the National Higher Education Policy. This structure will be, of course, and go for more effectiveness. And how best in the changed sort of environment and change setup of regulatory this system. These challenges which we can visualize, how these can be faced. Dr. Kyath will be focusing on this. Dr. Kyath, please take 12 minutes so that we can wind up within 3-4 minutes to achieve 12:30 goal. Thank you very much.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Good afternoon, sir, to everybody present in the seminar. My moderator, Professor S.S. Chahal, my colleague, Professor Sankhulaji, Honorable Secretary, Professor Jain, Chahal Sahab, Tripathi Sahab, other dignitaries and participants. The topic I am going to speak on today in this webinar is equity and inclusion in Indian society, challenges and steps to be taken for overcoming these challenges. And let me just start with the causes responsible for the emergence of such type of exclusion which takes place in Indian society and inclusion needs to be taken in. India, which has been a diversified society at various levels on the basis of religion, ethnicity, caste, tribe, languages, geographical regions, etc., for centuries in the past. And these diversities have been continuously used to differentiate groups in terms of superior versus inferior from one another. Those who were considered socially inferior and ritualistically impure were put in the exclusion from upper strata of the society. The exclusion has been the birthmark of caste society in India, where inclusion and exclusion of inferior castes but accommodated in a subordinate rank has been a feature for the centuries in this country. In this whole exercise, scheduled caste people have been arguably the most excluded social category, and the principal cause of this is the practice of untouchability, which has been deeply embedded in the traditional social order. Though the practice of untouchability stands abolished in law as per Article 17 of the Constitution, and hence ex-untouchables who are present scheduled caste people are now legally included, but they are not yet socially included, the prerequisite of which is so-called upper caste people cease to practice social discrimination against them and accept them as socially equals. Owing to this social exclusion and discrimination, not only tensions and violence take place, but communities like scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, religious minorities face humiliation and deprivation as disadvantaged and marginalized groups in the society. For their overall development and their emancipation from the clutches of exclusion, and to bring them in the mainstream, an equitable and inclusive society needs to be created, for which certain bold steps are needed to be taken by both union government and state governments. Fortunately, the new education policy 2020, while addressing various facets of exclusion, this policy offers to provide numerous such suitable steps and measures. Although the achieving of this noble objective, that is creating equitable and inclusive society, is not an easy task, and it has to face various tough challenges which already prevail in form of sources of social exclusion in our society. We may look at various social sources of social inclusion which in fact are challenges and face challenges with the people who want to create this society as an inclusive society. They have to face such challenges. Significantly, some of them may be taken as specific sources which occur only in India, including the universal challenges, universal sources, and they are working exclusively in Indian society with all other universal sources. Among those sources, there are three specific sources which I am going to talk on, and among these social exclusion and sources of social exclusions, the first is cultural heterogeneity, and there are two broad aspects of cultural heterogeneity. The first is religion. As we know that in other countries, in modern countries, and most of the countries, a specific religion is either an official or a national religion. But in our country, in India, no such religion is neither official nor national. And though our constitution assures all citizenship rights to minority religious communities, but yet sense of alienations persists in most of the minority religions in our country. The second one is language. As we all know that 8th schedule of Indian Constitution lists 22 languages in it, and it confers to them official status. Now, apart from these, numerous other linguistic minorities are also there who feel excluded in the system. And this is the right question, that why these tendencies persist in our society. The new education policy, while respecting the diversities of numerous linguistic groups, offers to provide education in their own manner, in their own mother tongue, so that linguistic groups may be included in the mainstream and do not feel alienated. The second source, that is spatial eternality, and as the notion of in this eternality, we will take that as the notion of multicultural citizenship is in vogue today, these days, we need to address this issue for the sake of cultural integration and homogenization. It is well known fact that the model we follow in our country is one nation and one state, for which we have to achieve national consolidation while recognizing and respecting cultural diversities. And the main objective in this context is to create a national state. For that, the idea of cultural homogenization is required to be filled. Now, what do we need in this context is that the notion of multicultural citizenship has to be shunned and cast out for the sake of cultural nationalism. For those who profess or follow religious different faiths or those who speak different mother tongues, they should not feel outsiders in this country. And our new education policy talks in this context and respecting their faiths and languages. It talks to establish special economic education zones in this context. And so far, and another aspect is to taken for that for maintaining federal structure, state-center relations needs to be administratively and financially strengthened. And while addressing this issue again, the new education policy maintains that the center will spend double the amount of whatever the state government provides in this area, which will help in enhancing the infrastructure, learning resources, and teacher capacity. The third source, that is caste hierarchy in this country, is a specific source which operates in India and to some extent in Nepal. It is indeed a unique in India. This, though, is more palpably embedded among Hindus, and it is just claimed that out of the Hindu religion, this cause or this source does not prevail. But let me just acknowledge that within other religious communities also, we find this discrimination, we find the other sections of society, for example, Ashrafs, Ajlaks, Arjals in Muslims, Neo-Buddhists in Buddhism, who has been their scheduled caste background, Majhabis among Sikhs communities or Sikhs religion, and Dalit Christians in Christianity. Thus, the familiar argument which is put forward by from different sections that non-Hindu religions do not endorse the caste system, in fact, is not valid. The scheduled caste and scheduled tribe population, which is or has been a historically excluded lot in this country, and we must know that the caste structure and the values it engenders are the most inhuman forms of exclusion in human history. Adivasis, who are having their own lands in hilly tracts and having their own languages, in fact, are national minorities. But they are also a minority only when the country as a whole is viewed as a unit. And therefore, they also fall in linguistic minorities. For their inclusion, they should be allowed to use their languages for the school education, and which has been well addressed in this new education policy 2020, which is a typical positive step for creation of inclusive society. The other sources which fall in universal sources of exclusion and also work as challenges in achieving the objectives of creation of equitable and inclusive society are poverty, rural-urban disparity, patriarchy. If we just look at the poverty, we see in modern societies, women work, women produce, they use values, and men create exchange values, and it happens on the basis of sexual division of labor. But in India, also sexual division of labor persists, but in this country, even those women who earn wages and salaries do not have freedom to spend it. The girls and women do not get equal share in ancestral property. We come across that different attitude towards boys and girls in the family. This is intertwined and reinforced by religious, caste norms and values, bringing intersectionality into play. These factors, all these factors, what do we see? That they function in co-jointly rendering intersectionality, and this is an important empirical reality in this country. In this way, patriarchy also comes in, and patriarchy becomes an important casual factor for poverty. Another aspect which I must talk about is that people of different phenotypical features, and particularly in the areas of northeastern areas, they do exist. And discrimination on that basis is not uncommon. A treatment towards these people is very shabby, discriminatory in terms of the wages, getting loans, licenses to start their enterprises, etc. All such factors not only cause but intensify poverty. The situation in regard to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe groups is worst. As per a survey report, let me just tell you that these group people earn just 21% and 34% respectively less than national household income average of 11,324 rupees. Now let me come to the measures and steps which needs to be taken by the government for eradication of social exclusion. The new education policy 2020 aspires to raise gross enrollment ratio to 50% by 2035, which is at present approximately 26%. And it also aspires that 3.5 crore seats in higher educational institutions will be added. This policy also speaks of multiple entry to be allowed with appropriate certifications. Plus, this policy also...
Please conclude, sir.
Okay, sir. This policy also talks of academic banks of credits to be established to facilitate transfer of credits. The policy recommends that regions with significantly larger population from educationally disadvantaged, socio-economic disadvantaged group should be declared special education zones, and the schemes and policies in zones are to be implemented to the maximum through additional concerted approach and efforts. This will help to truly change the educational landscape of this area. In addition to this, the policy also identifies special geographical locations as aspirational districts which require special interventions. This policy also talks of setting up gender inclusion funds. This policy also promotes multilingualism in both school and higher educational levels. Further, a national institute will be established to promote Pali, Prakrit, and Persian languages. This policy also advocates increased value of technology and equity. The government will set up a national fund for promoting scholarship and developing resources and facilities for students from under-representation groups. This policy also aims to increase the public investment in education sector to reach overall 6% of GDP to the earliest. And currently this...
Please, sir.
Okay, sir. Let me just conclude. Apart from all these provisions, or you may say the measures which are needed to be taken as bold step by government, the other scholarships which are already being accorded by the UGC and other academic and governmental institutions, they will continue with them. Further, you have already talked about the centers for the social exclusion and inclusive policy. They will continue. With all these observations and suggestions, I just close my talk here. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kyati, but I'm very I have to mention that there is time limitation, and that's why I have to request you. You have rightly mentioned that there are very important through 2-3 points I will take up. One is the constitutional provision. That is perfectly right. That last pioneering thing happened in India was right to education, and this was inserted in Constitution under Article 32A. The Indian Constitution says that free and compulsory education for all children up to 16 to 14 years of age. But this, of course, provision, that promise of providing education to all is still an obscure goal till date. We all know about it, that how far it is, and this is still to be achieved. Education has never been the criteria of this, this meant because of person literate, illiterate, and all this, and completing a particular age. But this is very, very important issue which has been opened up. Even this particular issue, qualify for a full-fledged seminar. Second point you have mentioned, that is education in mother tongue, of course. But when we talk of education in mother tongue, this is very, very important. We all endorse it. But look at it, when we feel challenges are great. How far this is, it opens up a Pandora box. We have to, transform all the literature of which into different mother tongue. This is a uphill task which have to follow, and these regulatory bodies have to take up. We are talking about the provision, but look at the, issues which they are opening up. That is very important. And then, of course, he has mentioned infrastructure. Infrastructure is very important to achieve all these. May it be inclusiveness, may it be equity, may it be excellence. Unless we improve infrastructure in our school education, we cannot achieve such things. We talk about smart classroom, but look at, we all know who are involved in education. We go to school, they will visit us, they will take us to one classroom. This is smart classroom. All small classroom have to be smart classroom. So that is our objective. Then infrastructure is very, very important, and then education is state subject. Of course, it's already clear that, and then of course there should be very, very appropriate connect. And I do not say this 100% connect so far is there between the union government and the state governments. This is very, very important. Recently, it has been very much clear so far as final year examination and these competitive examinations are concerned. We look into it that the education should not be governed by the Supreme Court and High Courts. So these are the very big issues which we have to taken up to meet our goals. And he has talked about Adivasis, very, very important issues. I have already mentioned that we have to reach the last person in the line. Adivasis are, different clans which we have to take along. They are also Indians. They are also our brethren. We have to take them along. We have to think about that when we talk of inclusiveness and equity. Equity and skill, that is very, very important in this atmosphere when we talk of skill development. Unless we focus on skill development and when we talk about dropout, what are the reasons for dropout? They cannot go further. They have to attain livelihood. They have to earn livelihood and they leave the schools. We need to support them. We need to make them skill oriented so that they will be very much here to remain in the line. With this, if I have to just sum up this session in just 1 or 2 minutes, I have to say that what we need out of this discussion is that equity and this inclusion is very, very important issue. This is a very important pillar in national education policies. Unless we go this, then चले अकेला चले चलो आप कुछ क्लैंस हो पढ़ती जाए कुछ ना हो तो क्या है इसको हम इक्विटी क्या कर कहते हैं इसको inclusion is very important. No, we have to think about inclusiveness. Why it is so? We have to take them along with. That is why that is purpose of higher education. But we talk about all our great persons. We quote them, but we need to act upon them. We have to take along with them. We have to definitely reduce regional biases. That is very important. For this, awareness creation is must. Do you go to these sort of Odisha, go to Rajasthan, go to other Madhya Pradesh? So many you can say that tribal areas, they do not know what even this education system is. So we have to create awareness. They need to be taken along with. We have to adopt bottom-up approach. How best practices are to be achieved. There are many countries. When we talk of Harvard, when we talk of UK, when we talk of UK, there are also these disparities are there, black and white, this and those claims, but they are managing it. So that is also disparity. We have to take best practices how they have managed it. Then equal opportunity cells, these are to be created, very important issue. But need is there. That is why the centers are made to improve curriculum and pedagogy system. This has to be included, this has to be vibrant, and this has to be very important point in all these systems so that they may know that all this. No, this is not very easy. The digitalization is important. We can change this look at those things when the presses were there we used to run up to the presses. But now it is very easy. Computer is there, but it's a challenge is great. But I have already mentioned that it is a challenge to convert these different. For example, take middle class or higher class science subjects, technical subjects. Do we have this literature in regional languages? We are emphasizing it is very important, but we have to create it. I know certain universities have been created. When I go to university, okay, your name is the name of the university is on particular language. What have you done for this? Nil. They have passed into the same things of engineering subject, medical subject. So this is very, very important issue. And then, of course, with all this, I conclude it, and I thank the organizers much on this, that giving us this opportunity. I thank the two speakers on this. So Solanki ji, we are colleagues and working on very different committees, and I thank him. We are changing a lot of views. I thank him profusely for coming up the provisions in the national education policy. Similarly, Dr. Vijay Kumar ji, he has, of course, very much elaborated different sort of points and important points. He has given his talks. And I don't know if the University Grant Commission desires, we can send 1 or 2 pages note on this to the organizers, and for compilation that will be easy. The decision will be, of course, the Honorable Secretary of UGC if they like so, and we can. There will be no problem that all the speakers can send 1 or 2 page note on their talks, so that there will be compilation also, and of course. If it is being recorded, it is very, very good point that that we can bring out certain points. With all this, I think time is up. I have taken few minutes more. I profusely thank the University Grant Commission, the Honorable Chairman, Honorable Secretary, University Grant Commission, Rajneesh Jain ji, and then Professor Dr. Chauhan Saab, Joint Secretary, who was with us for last 3-4 days and coordinating all these things. Dr. Tripathi ji, very good friend of mine, and he is, of course, last 2 days preparing all these programs. And at the end of this, I, on my behalf of co-speakers and on behalf of myself, I profusely thank the participants who have joined this, principals, vice chancellors, and others who have shown interest in this subject, and also thank to the University Grant Commission for this. Thank you very much. Over to University Grant Commission.
Thank you very much, sir. Now I will request Professor Rajneesh Jain, Honorable Secretary UGC, to say a few words, please, sir.
So I thank the panel, Professor Chahal, Professor Salunke, Professor Kayat, for elaborating different dimensions related with equity and inclusion, with all the challenges and the kind of measures which are to be taken up, and the road which you have suggested and the roadmap which you have suggested, I think will take it up forward. All the points which have been discussed here, they are recorded as well as noted down. So I assure that the points will be well taken care of, and they will be included appropriately wherever it is to be done. And as you are already aware that UGC is as such taking a large number of measures which are constitutional in nature, legal in nature, they are related with funding, they are related with providing fellowship and scholarships, they are related with creating awareness and sensitizing institutions and all the stakeholders, and it also has many centers for social exclusion and inclusion, and also for gender sensitization. So there is a lot which has already been done, but we hope that with this broader perspective which has come under National Education Policy 2020, we will be giving this a fresh impetus and will be moving forward to accommodate all in much better manner. और हमें पूरी उम्मीद है कि हम एक और अच्छे बेहतर माहौल का निर्माण कर पाएंगे और अपनी राष्ट्रीय शिक्षा नीति के जो लक्ष्य हैं उनको भी प्राप्त कर पाएंगे, जिसमें हम समता का और समावेश का पूरी तरीके से समायोजन करेंगे और सभी को बेहतर शिक्षा प्राप्त करने के संपूर्ण अवसर प्रदान करेंगे। आप सभी का मैं धन्यवाद करता हूं और फॉर्मली आज के कार्यक्रम का धन्यवाद देने के लिए मैं प्रोफेसर G.S. चौहान जी से निवेदन करता हूं।
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. On behalf of the University Grants Commission, I am really thankful to Professor Chahal Sahab, moderator of this webinar, very important webinars, Professor Salunke Sahab, Professor Kayat Sahab. I think that you accepted it very nicely and you have immediately responded very well. And I am really thankful, and I hope that the discussion is very nice. And I am really thankful to my Honorable Secretary is guiding time to time, and my another colleagues, Dr. Tripathi, we day and night work for this, and I'm really thankful to other dignitaries as well who attended this webinar, including Honorable Vice Chancellors, registrars and academicians, and I hope that this meeting is very fruitful of today's webinars, and I hope that as our Honorable Secretary has indicated and given you the signals, that we will incorporate all your valuable points, and I'm really thankful on behalf of University Grants Commission, all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. आप सभी का पुनः धन्यवाद. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.